Every day, between 200 and 300 people are reported missing in Germany. Most of them reappear quickly. 50% of reported cases are resolved within a week, 80% after a month. But there are also people who belong to the 3% who have been missing for more than a year. One of them is Daniel Eberhardt. After school in October 2004, the teenager boards a regional train and disappears without a trace during his journey. To this day, it is unclear what happened to Daniel Eberhardt. How could this have happened, and who might have had something to do with Daniel's disappearance? It is Monday, October 25th, 2004. 15-year-old Daniel Eberhardt doesn't have class until the second period that day. That's why he takes his time getting ready that morning. He even takes a bath, so his mother, Carola, has to remind him not to lose track of time. She has to leave the house early and says goodbye to her son until the evening. Nothing indicates that this will be the last conversation between Daniel and Carola Eberhardt. Daniel reminds his mother that he may be home late. His parents have been separated since 2003. Daniel has a brother 7 years older than him who lives with their father. Daniel, on the other hand, commutes between his father's apartment and his mother's apartment. He usually spends 4 days a week with his father and then 3 days over the weekend with his mother. But on this Monday evening, Daniel's father is flying off on vacation. Before he leaves, Daniel would like to go out for dinner with his father and his father's new partner, possibly this afternoon after Daniel finishes school. That's why it might take longer than usual for him to come home, he tells his mother. However, the meeting does not seem to be firmly planned. Daniel packs his lunch and sets off for school, where he arrives on time. It's actually a normal Monday. Daniel finishes at 4 p.m., and the last subject of the day is technology. When the lesson is over, he talks to his teacher about the material they have just covered. His teacher will later testify that Daniel was noticeably interested. The teenager is actually more of a quiet type. At 4:15 p.m., classmates see the 15-year-old getting on a bus. Later, Daniel is seen by his former basketball coach at the main train station. He watches him board a regional train. It departs at 5:29 p.m. The route includes the town of Thalfingen. Daniel's father lives there. It is assumed that the 15-year-old may have wanted to visit him. That would fit with what Daniel said to his mother that morning. However, Daniel never arrives at his father's house in Thalfingen. But the 15-year-old is definitely on board the train. Daniel is checked and found to be traveling without his student ticket. The ticket inspector takes his personal details at 5:35 p.m. Whether Daniel then gets off at Thalfingen or at an earlier stop remains unclear to this day. No one sees Daniel Eberhardt leave the train. The student disappears forever. Carola Eberhardt comes home late on the evening of October 25th, 2004. After work, she has an appointment to view an apartment. From 2005 onwards, Daniel is supposed to spend more time with her again. That's why she's looking for a new apartment where Daniel could have a bigger room. When Carola comes home after the viewing, the 15-year-old is not yet home. She therefore calls her ex-husband to ask what Daniel's plans for the evening are. Her older son answers the phone. Only now does it become clear that Daniel has not shown up at either his father's or his mother's house after school. Carola, her older son, and Daniel's father discuss what to do next. None of them know where Daniel is. Nevertheless, they decide that Daniel's father should go on his vacation as planned that evening and drive to the airport. Daniel's brother waits at his father's apartment while Carola stays at her own apartment. After all, Daniel is bound to show up at one of the two apartments sooner or later. But that doesn't happen. At around 10 p.m., Carola Eberhardt calls the police. The officers initially reassure her. They tell her that Daniel is just a teenager who probably needs some space. But their reassurances cannot allay Carola's concerns. The next morning, on October 26, 2004, she calls Daniel's school directly. She asks whether her son has shown up for class, but the 15-year-old is absent without excuse. In the days that followed, dogs and helicopters searched for Daniel, but there was simply no trace of Daniel Eberhardt to be found. The police found all kinds of personal belongings in Daniel's locker at school. His wallet, including his ID documents, his cell phone, his MP3 player, and his glasses. The only thing he took with him was his black school backpack. Shortly after his disappearance, the case of Daniel Eberhardt is reported on television. As a result, 15 callers contact the studio. 2 witnesses believe they have seen Daniel abroad. Another claims to have seen Daniel on a train. Another claims to have seen him in a place 4 hours away. The police department in charge follows up on all the leads, but unfortunately, the broadcast does not lead to any success in the investigation. Daniel Eberhardt remains missing. 4 months after Daniel's disappearance, Daniel's mother Carola receives a phone call. At first, there is silence on the line. Then she hears shallow breathing. In the background, she hears quiet voices that sound like teenagers. She is sure that the caller is her son Daniel. Apart from breathing, the caller does not make a sound. The call lasts just under 3 minutes before Carola asks her son's name into the receiver. She thinks she hears a hesitation on the other end of the line. Then the call ends. Such calls continue to come in over the following years, more than 15 in total. One of them lasts a full 35 minutes. During all these conversations, only Carola speaks. Not a word comes from the other end of the line. Only during one of the calls does Carola hear a shrill alarm in the background. The sound is so loud and sudden that Carola presses the hang-up button in shock. It remains the only noticeable noise. During the other calls, Carola usually hears only shallow breathing before the line goes dead. Nevertheless, these calls give Daniel's mother a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this is the missing person's attempt to somehow let her know that he is okay. The last of these calls comes on October 26, 2009, exactly 5 years and 1 day after the disappearance of 15-year-old Daniel. Since then, there has been no further sign of life. In 2011, the case is discussed again on television. 2 callers come forward, claiming to have seen Daniel independently of each other at the French border. One claims to have seen Daniel at the train station, the other at a hardware store. Carola Eberhardt then distributes flyers and puts up posters in the region. Unfortunately, there are no useful leads. According to media reports, it is no longer assumed that Daniel Eberhardt was the victim of a crime. The possibility that Daniel may have taken his own life is being considered. In the months before his disappearance, Daniel is said to have become increasingly withdrawn. A classmate later said that Daniel had been bullied. His school performance declined, so he transferred from high school to a secondary school. During this time, his only really good grades were in sports and art. An application for a training position with the police was rejected. He was also rejected for training as a technical draftsman, and after an injury, he was no longer able to pursue his favorite hobby, playing basketball. He also spent less time with his parents. Instead of going on outings together, Daniel preferred to visit the video store to rent a few movies. Otherwise, Daniel spent most of his time in front of his computer, in chat rooms. He is also said to have spent his lunch breaks at school in an internet cafe. His mother finds a picture drawn by Daniel in his desk drawer. It presumably shows him jumping off a cliff. Nevertheless, his mother Carola does not believe that her son is dead. After all, no body was ever found during the search. So Daniel's mother does not give up hope. Instead, she pursues other avenues herself. For example, she considers the possibility that Daniel may have fallen into the clutches of a cult or similar organization. He was not very confident and was going through a difficult phase. It is possible that he may have met people with a bad influence on the internet. Carola even inquires with relevant organizations, but gets nowhere. The police searched Daniel's computer and also the computers in the internet cafe. There were no indications of any relevant online activities. Nevertheless, in an interview in 2019, Carola recalls that Daniel had spent more time than usual on the computer one weekend shortly before his disappearance. The 15-year-old had been very careful to ensure that his mother did not see what he was doing on the internet. He also printed out several pages. When asked about this, he waved it off and claimed that the printouts were job applications. In retrospect, this seems strange to her. However, it is not known whether this behavior could have anything to do with his disappearance. After work, Carola spent some time wandering the streets of large cities in southern Germany and questioning people herself. She was always hoping that someone might have seen Daniel and could remember something important. Daniel's mother is following every lead she can find.
The search even takes them to France. She and Daniel used to vacation there often, and he felt very comfortable in France. Daniel was interested in the military, and Carola receives a tip that leads her to the Foreign Legion in Strasbourg. Perhaps Daniel could have seen this as an alternative to training with the police. A local taxi driver remembers meeting a German man who wanted to go to the recruitment office. Fittingly, the name Eberhardt is noted in a nearby hotel. A major in Albania testifies that he saw Daniel. The young man applied to the military but was rejected because he was too young. The whole matter is passed on to the German police. However, upon inquiry, they learn from the Foreign Legion that a Daniel Eberhardt was never registered for an entrance exam. Another witness claims to have seen Daniel in Montelimar and states that the boy was working on farms there. Carola also searches for her son there herself and distributes flyers. Unfortunately, again without success. A newspaper article states that Daniel borrowed 2 books from the library shortly before his disappearance: a world atlas and a self-help book entitled How to Motivate Myself. This could be interpreted as an indication that Daniel may have actually run away. Daniel has now been missing for more than 22 years. Since his disappearance, his family has suffered greatly from the situation. Daniel's mother, Carola, suffered a nervous breakdown in 2004 and was unable to work for almost 3 months. When Carola eventually moved after Daniel's disappearance, she rented a 3-room apartment, as planned with Daniel, even though she herself did not need the 3rd room. She furnished the 3rd room for Daniel and kept all his personal belongings there in case he ever came home. She also kept his phone number in case Daniel tried to call her. Every birthday, Carola writes a letter to her missing son and buys him a gift. The letters and gifts are waiting at her home for Daniel to come home and catch up on everything he has missed since his disappearance. Unfortunately, there is still no trace of Daniel Eberhardt. At the time, he only had his black school backpack with him. All his other personal belongings were in his school locker, including his glasses, wallet, and cell phone. At the time of his disappearance, Daniel was almost 1.80 meters tall, well-built, with blue eyes and medium blonde hair. He was wearing a black hooded jacket and black jeans. He can be easily recognized by a healed burn on his right hand. What happened to Daniel Eberhardt after October 25, 2004, remains a mystery to this day. Even though it has been a long time since Daniel Eberhardt disappeared, his mother Carola does not want to give up hope. If you have any information or think you recognize Daniel in the photos, it may still be worth reporting your observation. I wish Daniel's family all the best, and am keeping my fingers crossed that Daniel Eberhardt will be found one day. Please share the video so that more people can learn about this case.
A like also helps to boost the algorithm a little and suggest the video to more people. And feel free to leave me a comment. Thank you in advance, and thank you for watching. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, bye everyone.